Hi, I'm Shannon and I'm an alcoholic. My drinking story is one of extreme isolation. I was born and raised on a relatively small island called Curacao in the Caribbean. And when you're younger, it feels like it's a big world, but as you grow up, you realize all its limitations. I was a girl with a big city mind stuck on a tiny little rock. I had my first taste of alcohol when I was 14. At age 16, I was diving into my parents' liquor cabinet every weekend. And it was around that same age that I grew apart from most of my childhood friends. Because I started noticing that I was somehow different. I just couldn't connect with them like I used to anymore. So we just drifted apart. Instead, I spent most of my time with my first boyfriend, who had a bit of a drug problem himself. So he would be drinking and drugging, and I would be drinking alongside him. And of course, it's only in retrospect that I realized this, but it was just my way of coping with the boredom of the lack of mental stimulation and creative challenges that I'd actually been missing at that point in my life. So slowly but surely, alcohol became my new best friend. Whenever things would go wrong in my relationship with my boyfriend, alcohol would be there to comfort me. Whenever I felt overwhelmed, alone, scared, angry, upset, whatever, I could just lose myself in alcohol. And before long, I was discovering blackout drinking. And by the time I was in college, I was drinking every single night. But then towards the end of my college career, I started thinking that maybe my life would be better without alcohol. I knew it was doing me more harm than good, but I didn't quite know how to stop. There were some nights where I attempted to stop, and I would get so physically unwell that I'd cave because I just couldn't fall asleep without drinking anymore. And I had a friend in college who was telling me about this AA meeting that he went to, and I listened very closely, but I was thinking to myself that I was stronger than them. I could do it on my own. I didn't need some group to help me get sober. So I graduated with a Ph.D. in alcoholism and moved from Florida to California in pursuit of my dream of acting. So I found myself in an even bigger city where I didn't know a single soul and with no idea how to start my career. So naturally I confided in my best friend, alcohol. And before I knew it, I became an around-the-clock drinker. And it wasn't until I got pulled over for running a stop sign that I was found out. The officers noticed that I was a little bit intoxicated, so I got arrested for a DUI. And that's when my whole life changed. It had been my dirty little secret up until that point, but because of the arrest, I had to tell my parents that I needed money for a lawyer, and then the words just came pouring out. It's like it opened the gateway for me to actually talk about my problem with alcohol for the first time, to admit it to another human being. And a week later, I stumbled into my first AA meeting. And I managed to string together 3 months of sobriety in California before I had to move back to the island of Curacao. And that's where the real struggle began for me. Because in California, I had around-the-clock meetings. I was doing 90 and 90, or more like 270 and 90. And when I returned to Curacao, all there was one meeting a week. I felt like a fish out of water, slowly suffocating. Not having the distraction of the big city to get lost in, not having a strong support group, not having anyone my age in the AA meetings. I didn't know if I would make it. And after 6 months, I ended up relapsing. And as you've heard in many shares before, with each relapse, I found a new bottom. At one point, I was dating someone from the meeting, and we started relapsing together, and I found myself at such a deep low at the end of that bender that I literally wasn't sure if I would come out of it alive. And that's when I decided that I needed to do something different. If I was going to stay in Curacao, I needed to find a way to make the program work for me. So I changed my attitude, I changed my mindset, and I showed up to the meetings with a new level of dedication and open-mindedness. I absorbed the AA literature like I used to absorb alcohol. And when we had visitors come to our meeting from abroad, I finally reached out and asked someone to be my sponsor. And when I expressed my difficulty with having only one meeting a week, some ladies from the meeting graciously decided to start a second meeting. So now I had 2 lifelines a week. And I think that truly saved me at a time when I really, really needed to restructure my brain. I was rebuilding my life, and it was the only sense of stability that I had in my life. And as I'm sharing this now, I can happily say that I am 10 years sober on Curacao. For me, the meetings are like a mental push-up, just toning the muscle in my brain to remind myself that my brain reacts differently to alcohol. When I forget that, I will pick up a drink. I know that I'm not immune and I'm not safe. My brain will never function like that of a non-alcoholic. And the meetings offer me a way out of my own isolation. Because as a highly sensitive person and an introvert, I really like my alone time, but I know that if I spend too much time alone with my own company in my head, I will get lost in stinking thinking. I will forget who I am. I will forget that I'm an alcoholic. I've traveled around the world and gone to meetings, and everywhere I go, it feels like coming home. So AA is my community, my home base, my lifeline, all around the world. With AA, I no longer have to live in isolation, and that is what keeps me sober. Thank you for letting me share.